The ontological epistemology of St. Thomas and its importance to the development of modern science. Western philosophy and natural science have historically developed together, often as two sides of the same coin, explaining in different ways the same reality, among many of the greatest minds of the last 25 centuries. In fact, many ancient philosophers employed observations of nature and mathematics to explain and demonstrate philosophical concepts. From figures such as Plato, who used many examples related to geometry in his dialogues, Aristotle, who wrote the Physics, Meteorology, and Parts of Animals, among other works, and Euclid's studies of optics and geometry, to modern philosophers such as René Descartes, having a strong background in mathematics, and Immanuel Kant, with the explication of phenomena and noumena, to even many other great minds known principally as scientists, such as Isaac Newton and his perspective of absolute space, to more recent figures, including Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking. Among many developments in the history of philosophy, the introduction of idealism in modern times and its impact on contemporary philosophy have raised many questions, and in many ways problems remain not yet fully addressed, leaving much unreconciled with scientific theory. In addition, the effects of idealist thought can be found far beyond the limits of philosophical study. While the impacts of idealism have led to subjectivist perspectives in ethical theory and can also be found more broadly in social mores and attitudes in secular society, it also poses a risk of bifurcating the centuries-old symbiotic relationship between natural science and philosophy. From many modern philosophers, including René Descartes, David Hume, Immanuel Kant, and Friedrich Nietzsche, among others, the study of traditional metaphysics was met with much skepticism and derision. A result of this was an axiomatic shift in perspective away from the object of thought, an apple or an elephant, and towards the thinker himself. This shift in viewpoint led many to come to have deep-rooted doubts about the external world and whether real objects truly exist, beyond our ideas about them. Perhaps one of the more troubling developments in modern philosophy and its incompatibility with natural science was Immanuel Kant's assertion that matter is divisible to infinity. Proposition 4, paragraph 503. As Kant's philosophy included the proposition that once one recognizes that both space and spatial properties, such as divisibility, are not properties of things in themselves, but rather only appearances, one can reject the proposition that seems to necessitate the acceptance of simple substances, namely the idea that simple substances must precede the wholes they compose. Such a conclusion was made necessary by Kant's innovations related to the claimed distinction between phenomena and noumena. However, modern science teaches not only that space and matter can be directly experienced and empirically measured by man, but also that matter is demonstrably reducible only to certain subatomic particles, and that there is a point beyond which matter cannot be further divided. As I will attempt to show in this presentation, I believe the metaphysical understanding of St. Thomas Aquinas's ontological epistemology, particularly its critical realist approach, can repair the seeming divorce between philosophy and science and restore the traditional mutual enrichment between these two critical fields of human endeavor. If the actual existence, or being itself, of things in our human experience is at best beyond our experiential reach, as argued by Kant, or even worse, simply a subjective idea and not real, as contemplated in idealism, then why do so many scientific theories and laws, such as Newtonian or classical physics, thermodynamics, and quantum theory, demonstrably explain so much in the apparent world around us? For no one can doubt the profound successes modern science has enjoyed, both in explicating physical effects from causes and in predicting future results of events that have not yet come to pass, such as a lunar eclipse. Further, why can what science teaches us be independently reproduced by others, often from different cultures and backgrounds, and be demonstrated to yield the same results without respect to the particular scientist, and lead to a common understanding of our apparent experience? There seems a clear disconnect between what many modern and contemporary philosophers have argued to be the case and what so many scientists have unequivocally demonstrated and continue to do so with increasing precision and understanding. At its core, natural science makes use of concepts such as truth, knowledge, and being, and this is done solely by man's exercise of his intellectual ability, his intellect. For Aquinas, truth resides primarily in the intellect, insofar as the intellect is conformed to the object understood, while truth in the thing itself is only recognized secondarily, insofar as it has some relation to the intellect. As a result, truth does not reside in a thing or an object, whether an atom, a cell, or a photon, in the absence of an intellect or a subject. Truth itself is a dualistic notion relating the object or a thing and the subject or an intellect. Knowledge, on Aquinas' view, is of things that are true. Put another way, Aquinas writes that knowledge is according as the thing known is in the knower. Thus here we also see the same dualism reside, for truth and knowledge are, by definition, of the same relationship between the known and the knower. In other words, Aquinas views truth as epistemic in nature. Interestingly, Aquinas also perceives a fundamental relationship between knowledge and being itself. He writes that, quote, "Now everything, in as far as it has being, so far it is knowable." This statement makes clear the necessary connection between that which exists or has being and that which is knowable, as the essence of science is to come to know, as human subjects, with greater perfection and precision, the natural world and the surrounding universe. Aquinas aids us in understanding that this knowability of all that science ponders is made possible solely by the very existence or being of all objects under its scrutiny. For it would be impossible for science, which is the empirical study of objects through the use of our senses and experience to learn or gain knowledge about that which does not possess being or does not exist. Based on Aquinas' understanding of truth, knowledge, and being, all scientific investigation and conclusions must of necessity, owing to their being, be verifiable by the study of others through independent testing, which can affirm or deny their veracity. Such objective verification is entirely independent of the particular scientist and is solely dependent upon the object itself under study. Only such a robust and unbiased approach is worthy of the moniker known as the scientific method, as understood for the last 2 centuries. Importantly, it must also be noted that Aquinas' epistemology requires that, as Callum Scott describes, quote, the appearance of the object through sensory observation to the thinking subject is secondary to the being of the thing itself, as being for a realist precedes knowing, even with the caveat that the construer of knowing may not know being itself. A question arises about the nature or even the possibility of an absolute truth, one in which there is no place for subjective engagement, an ontological truth, present simply in the being of the thing and independent of an observer. For if such an absolute truth is real, it must necessarily be prior to truth as defined earlier. Aquinas teaches that man does in fact have access to such ontological truths of being, this access being the human reasoning capacity, wherein such truths are expressed as knowledge of being. In this limited context, knowledge is specified as of being, but can only be arrived at after an observer has engaged his intellect as a result of some sensory experience. In effect, for man, absolute or ontological truth can only be derived from one's previous encounter with the real object, which informs us of certain objective qualities that positively exist, independent of our own knowledge of them. As Callum Scott, a philosopher from the University of South Africa, describes it, in interpreting the view of Aquinas, quote, although all true statements must be grounded in being, they are found in the act of adequation between being and intellect, a doing which belongs solely to the potential of the conscious subject. In essence, without self-reflective subjects, truth could not exist. Moreover, by extension of this idea, knowledge and language must also require self-reflective subjects. Such a realization underscores the importance and profound nature of being, as distinct from, and more importantly, as prior to, concepts such as truth, knowledge, understanding, and language. As a result, all scientific theories and laws that purport to explain or undergird a truth about the universe must be subjective, cognitive constructions if they are detached from being. Put another way, all valid scientific theories must acknowledge being, at least implicitly, if they are to survive empirical testing and bring to light a real truth about the world. For only when a theory connects with the real can it be proven false. Science describes and approximates truth only by bringing together object and subject, or by coupling ontology and epistemology. Consequently, science is never strictly studying an object in complete isolation, but rather involves a kind of construction of the mind. For scientific theories to be true, the same conformity as in true statements between being and intellect must be made. St. Thomas remarks in his commentary to Aristotle's Posterior Analytics that to know something scientifically is to know it completely, which means to apprehend its truth perfectly. The idealist and subjectivist philosophies of many modern and contemporary philosophers either doubt or deny altogether that this is possible. Rather, it is the Thomistic epistemology and Aquinas' insistence on acknowledgement of the real object as a basis for man's pursuit of truth, knowledge, and understanding that best comports with the inquiries and learnings of modern science.